Hey everyone, my guest today is the Tony-nominated actress Maria Dizzia. Maria starred in the Broadway production of the Sarah Rule play, In the Next Room. Some of her many other theater credits include If I Forget, What the Constitution Means to Me, Belleville, Uncle Vanya, Drunken City, Eurydice, and many more. Some of her many television credits include Before, Agatha All Along, Life and Beth, The Staircase, Horace and Pete, Orange is the New Black, Master of None, Newsroom, Elementary, and The Blacklist. Some of her many film credits include My Old Ass, Christmas Eve in Miller's Point, Christine, Martha, Marcy, May, Marlene, Funny Pages, While We're Young, and Margin Call. Maria is an extraordinary acting teacher and director of film and theater. Most recently, she directed the play Pre-Existing Condition, written by Marin, Ireland, here in New York City. I could go on and on reading, but people Google the rest. Welcome, Maria Dizzia, to the podcast. Hello, hello.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's so good to see you.
Oh my God, I could look at this face, this beautiful face, which I've had the great privilege of seeing in person, and now I get to share your glorious story and talent with my listeners. I was saying before we started, I'm just always remarkably inspired and interested in all you are doing because you have found many lanes to be creative, and they don't always include waiting for someone else to give you the opportunity. Um, and I've watched master classes of yours on my computer and just really dug deep into the ways in which you're sharing your process and your passion with others.
That's so
So,
nice.
so true. May we go back? I want to talk a little bit about young Maria and who was in your house and how creativity came into your life and what was the kernel, the seed of wanting to pursue it as a not just a passion, but as a career of some kind.
Yeah, oh, that's such a nice question. I love how you say it. Who is in your house?
Who's in your house?
No, I love it. That's so great. My my mother, my father, I live with my grandmother, Virginia, and my sister. And my mother and father were or my mother is still alive. My father passed away in 2019. They were and are very creative people. My mother would always correct me when I would say that she's creative. She would say, I'm not, I'm an editor. You know, she's more of a curator. She thinks of herself as a curator and as the person who comes in, but I actually think she's deeply creative. And my father is very creative. He was a lawyer, and he would read to us his closing arguments uh, sometimes. And they were very poetic, and he quoted literature in his closing arguments. And I remember like sitting in the living room and listening, and he would ask us, you know, we would ask for feedback and what we felt persuaded or not persuaded by, you know. And so he would give like performances. And my mother is just like a very visually, you know, she's a very visual person. She's extremely visual. And one of my favorite things that she ever said, because I feel like it was both sides, you could see both sides of her, is that I once said to her, you know, oh, you're so beautiful. And she said, ugh, everybody's beautiful when you know them. And I love it so much because it's the two sides of her. It's like that she has like a very like incisive, right, like sophisticated sense of beauty that's rarefied, but then also that she revealed that she also has this beautiful idea that when you know and love something, it's beautiful.
Right, right.
And I just love that in saying that in that one comment, she was able to show both sides of
But
her.
also that it starts with ugh.
Yeah, right. Right. That's okay. Oh, everybody's beautiful when you know them.
Like I feel like I know her. I feel like I
Yeah.
know her from that. Can you talk about having a grandmother in your home with you? And can you talk a little bit more about Virginia?
Yeah, I really loved it so much. But you know, because just a totally different way of thinking about the world. Completely, completely different. You know, grew up during the Depression, you know, and so we had drawers that were filled with rubber bands and uh, you know, bag way before people were like recycling and things like that, you know, bags and empty coffee cans and, you know, boxes and things that could be reused. And just the, you know, a kind of, I don't know, a sense of, to make you understand as a young kid that you don't live in scarcity, you know, that it was very obvious that there was a person, you know, she talked about it all the time. You know, don't throw that away. Don't, you know, clean it, fix it, that kind of thing. And also, like, you know, my mom would always say about her, she was like, you didn't have a grandmother who baked cookies. You know, she was like a tough lady. You know, she wasn't like, you know, she was not, she was obviously like, she loved us very much, but she was not like hugging and kissing. You know, she was, you know, pointing an arthritic finger and telling you to
Who
clean
took
something
my
up.
rubber bands?
Yeah, exactly. You know, but you know, it just gave me like just like an extraordinary perspective that like the older that I get, the more important it is to me and the more grateful that I am that I had it. And I do remember really early, like as an actor, I was in this summer camp and you know, they had cast me like in I think what they thought were all the appropriate roles. And I was always like fine. And then they gave me the role as the grandmother and I, you know, like killed it as a grandmother. And I remember so much because I was doing my own grandmother. And then I remember my teacher like running at me and grabbing my face and saying, "Oh, Maria, you're a character actor." Like she had finally discovered the thing and it made her so happy. And that was something that I always remembered my whole life is that even when, you know, so when I went to college and like later, and I was always being asked to do ingenue parts for whatever reason, I always had in the back of my head that the thing that I was actually good at
Right.
was
You
that
know,
other thing.
when
Yeah.
you were growing up, I mean, for people growing up at a certain time or in a certain place,
Yeah.
having a multi-generational household was quite common. But when I was growing up, and I don't know about when you were growing up, it really wasn't.
Yeah,
And
no, yeah, I was the only person who lived with her grandmother. I
and
didn't
did
have any other friends who had a
right.
multi-generational
And
household. Yeah.
did you like that? Were you like, did you feel like you had to explain it? Were you
Yeah. I felt like I had to.
embarrassed? Were you all the things?
Yes, I was all the things. I was all the things. I felt like I had to explain it. And I think that sometimes I would feel like, you know, my grandmother was like a wild card. Like I didn't know what she was going to say to my friends and how she was going to, you know, and so I felt like I had to prepare them for her kind of like old world,
Yeah,
you know, like kind of sternness that was going to be coming at them. It was not what they were used to at all, you know.
right. And this was in New Jersey?
Yes, this was in New Jersey, in Cranford.
Okay. And so you obviously you played a grandmother at an age at a very young age.
Yeah.
I did that in Tartuffe. I remember playing like Madame Purnell and being like, wait a minute. I thought this was the worst part. This is the best part. I
It
come
is
in.
the right. They're the best parts. They're the best parts. Those are the part like if everybody says like now they're like, oh, I can't wait to get old and like say what I really think. You
Yes.
know?
Although then I had to put like baby powder in my hair and now less and less, less and less.
Yeah. Right. That's
Um,
true.
okay, so talk a little bit about like I love that you remember, I mean, mentors and people early on who say things that stick in the back of our head. Like I know as a young person, someone saying, Maria, you're a character actress, like that could hurt your feelings or be very exciting or be unclear what that even means. When did
Mhm.
you decide if you're already in camp doing plays, there was an attention to this idea of wanting to do this and be with people making stories up together. Like,
Yeah.
how did that begin? How did it find you and you find it?
Yeah. I mean, I really my earliest memory is in kindergarten, you know, and being in a play and not as uh, it wasn't I didn't feel like I had an affinity for it at all. I just knew that I loved it and that I could barely stop smiling and laughing the whole time. I just the whole thing. And I think that maybe like when I think back on it now, I think it's the idea of like playing in front of adults, that there was something like, oh, we're gonna like show them the way, we're gonna let them see this like private play in some way, that it just felt like so exciting and kind of like, you're not supposed to do this. Like, you're not supposed to show like how you play in front of other people. And so I really loved that. And then the other memory that I have is that then which I think really is for me, I always think that I'm like, oh, that was very much like who I am as an actor, and like is that I was in the third grade, and I remember I was in a parking lot like with my mom after a camp, and I said to my mom, I know I'm not the best actor in my class, but I think if I keep trying, I can get good at it, and it's what I want to do. And I think that's always how I felt about it, is that I didn't pursue acting because I was like, oh, this is what I'm best at. It wasn't. And it was like, this is what I love and what I want to learn to be good at. And because like when I watched, like I still remember her name, Marjorie Lathrop, and she was great in the third grade. She was great. She was like a free, playful, like unpredictable person. And I just remember that when I watched her, I loved how I felt when I watched her. And I was like, I want to be able to do that. I was like, I want to know how to do it.
Because you lived in New Jersey, there's a proximity to Manhattan. And did you guys come in and see a lot of theater growing up?
Always. We saw so many things. And because I feel like my parents really have the souls of artists, they took us to amazing things. They didn't take us to see no offense, Radio City, but to take us to see the Christmas spectacular at Radio City. I mean, I saw the very first production of Little Shop of Horrors. I mean, that blew my mind. A tiny, tiny little theater. It was extraordinary. My mom took us to see an Antigone I think it might have, now that I lived in the city, I think that it might have been in the space where Here Arts Center was,
Oh,
because I
yeah.
remember that there were all these columns in the space, and that we were underground. We were in a basement, and the ceiling was very low. And I remember my father commented that one of the members of the chorus, his only response to hearing information seemed to be to make his eyes wider. And my dad was saying he was worried that he was going to hear 3 important things in a row. He was going to run out of facial expressions. But we were when we saw Antigone, my God, I was, I don't know, 11.
Young.
We saw Lysistrata in the same space, I remember. They took us to and they also took us to, I think I saw the Our Town. It's so interesting because it got panned. It was the Our Town with Spalding Gray. Now, doesn't that sound like a great production?
Yeah, yeah.
When you think about who Spalding Gray is, really from that place, really wearing his flannel shirt and telling you about those people and everything like that, and about that life. And it was extraordinary. Like, I loved that play, and it's now like going back and looking at the reviews, I'm like, that's so interesting. I think that production was like ahead of its time in terms of its austerity, and it was gorgeous. I still remember Eric Stoltz put his head down and I think I was in the 7th or 8th grade when I saw it. He put his head down in the soda shop scene, and he must have held his breath or something in order to do it every night. And so that when he put his face back up, it was bright red, so that he was like blushing because of his love for Emily. It was the most incredible thing I'd ever seen on stage. It's like, to this day, it's
Trying
one
to
of the
think.
things I've ever seen. It was him and Penelope Ann Miller.
Penelope Ann Miller, and then I think like Helen Hunt took over or something. Like,
yes, right. That's so
right?
interesting.
Like I
Yeah, but I got to see
remember.
Penelope Ann Miller. I mean, it was
Yes.
a gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous production. I loved it. So we saw, so those are the things that my parents, they took us to see, and I loved them. And then I always say to my mom that part of it was like, she would dress us up to go see the play. It wasn't like, oh, we're going to go see this. It was like going to I mean, I hate to sound it, but it was like going to church or something.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
very nice clothes. And then my favorite thing is that she would buy, even as we got older, she would always buy like children's seats for us. So I remember when we were older, like 15, she would be like, go stand over there. I told them you're 11. So you could so she could get like the kid discount. So,
Yeah, yeah,
you know,
deservedly so. It's
yeah,
ridiculous how much theater costs.
I
So
know.
you went to college in California?
That's where I went to grad school. I went to upstate New York. I went to Cornell for college, and then I
And
went
were
to grad
you
school at UCSD.
okay? Was there a theater major at Cornell, or did you just do a liberal arts?
Yeah, I mean they do have the thing where it's like everybody has to take all the classes and you get
Right.
the BA. But yeah, I was a theater major.
So when you think back to kind of like I was just saying to somebody, my, I had two kind of early on communities, right? Like the people went to college with that I did
Mhm,
plays with. And
mhm.
then I like Naked Angels, this theater company in New York, when
I
I look
totally know
back,
Nick.
like
Yeah,
everything, everything kind of springs from there in some form or another.
yeah.
What are your early, because first of all, you are a like repeat business, like Sarah Rule loves you
Mhm.
so much. There are playwrights who really want you to be in their plays and write for, like, you are a muse for many people. You have a really incredible community of theater makers, and it's grown now to filmmakers and TV makers as well. But if you look back to like early community that you can see how it still resonates today. Can you
Mhm.
talk a little bit about those relationships?
Yeah, I mean there are people that I met in college, like Jenny Schwartz, and we have worked together. I did like a play of hers in the Fringe Festival, and through that I met so many great people. And then really it is from UCSD, and that's, I mean, I went to school with Steve Cosson and Annie Kaufman, and I still remember, the first play that Annie and I did together. She wrote me a postcard and she says, I hope she's like, I know we're going to work together forever. And it's just amazing to me now, like when you get older and you realize like how life can take people in so many different directions, that it makes me, I'm like, oh, it's so amazing that that was actually able to happen, and that,
Yeah,
and that it was really her making that happen, because as the director, she's the one who chooses the projects and the actors, and so that was really like, she did an incredible thing for me. She did an incredible, I actually, like, I was thinking about it. I think that Annie, is Annie Kaufman and Les Waters, who was a teacher at UCSD. And those are the people to whom I owe um, my career.
yeah,
Because those are the people who not only were willing to work with me, um, but who introduced me to other people. And especially now that that I teach people, I knew it was hard at the time, but now I really see how hard it is. I work with so many, talented, great people, and I see how hard it is for them to break into theater in New York, and I always try to do as much as I can to introduce people and to, tell them about me, some of the smaller organizations to go to, but
hmm,
I see how hard it is, and so it makes me more and more grateful for Les and Annie
yeah.
all the time, all the time.
So when you think back post college, I mean, Les
Yeah,
and Annie have like these extraordinary careers that have gone on for decades,
I know.
working with developing new work and creating really out of the box theater that's thrilling, and they keep
Yeah,
reinventing themselves as well along the
right.
way. Um, what was the first production that you got to do professionally in New York?
Uh, the first production professionally that I did was called The Wooden Breeks, that I did professionally, and that was through that was MCC Theater, and that was with Trip Coleman, and that was like my first off Broadway show. And
Yeah,
Trip Coleman was definitely someone I met him through Annie Kaufman, and because it was Adam Bach, it was like that. That was like the thing is that Annie cast me in a reading of an Adam Bach play, and then Adam introduced me to Trip. And I remember I had auditioned for a couple of Adam's plays and wasn't cast, but then when The Wooden Greeks was coming up and Trip was directing it, he cast me in that.
You have also managed to, in recent years, go from like the obligatory like episode of Law and Order that everyone does early
Yeah.
on, or some version of that, to getting to do, after like this incredibly complex, wonderful theater career, working on incredible plays, being Tony nominated. Congrats, by the way. That's exciting.
That's so nice.
It's
Thank you.
just exciting.
It was really good.
Yeah, yeah, and like what a dream, especially for someone who grew up in New Jersey, going to see Broadway as well, and sort of,
Yeah.
it doesn't disappoint in certain
Right.
ways.
Yes,
Um,
100%. It
I
does.
know, I always say if you can do a Broadway show, do it. It's
Yeah.
fantastic, even
Right.
with
I
all
know.
the anxiety that comes with it.
100%.
100%. But you like also have really broken through the what some would consider the film and TV nut. Like for a long time, like you were a theater actress or you could do film and television, and you had a face for one or the other, right? Or a
Right.
disposition for one or
Yes,
the other.
100%.
And then like indie film started, and people could kind of break through in that way. But what, like you are everywhere. It's thrilling. Did you sort of crack an audition nut that you finally understood had an audition for films and television? Is it just luck that someone you knew from one lane brought you over to the other? Can you talk a little bit about the evolution of this huge career you're having on screens, large and small?
That's so nice. That's such a nice way to say it. It's a very
It's
different
true.
perspective than I have from here. That's so nice. But yeah, I think that it's always both, right? You work hard and then you get lucky. I think that it's both. And so the lucky part, I think, was getting to be a part of Martha, Marcy, May, Marlene. I think that was the thing that really helped. I had done some things before that, but I think that it was being in that
Can you tell people about that project, what it was, how it sort of made a splash? Kind of just talk a little bit about that project.
yeah, that's an independent film that I work with those guys all the time. That's how I met like Antonio Campos, who produced it, and Sean Durkin, who directed it. Sean Durkin made a short film called Mary Last Scene, and my agent at Gersh showed it to me, and she was like, it was wonderful. She was a great person, Jen Conowall, and she said, I think that you would really like this short. And it was already done, and she was like, he's an interesting guy, and he was just out of NYU, and she showed it to me, and I was like, yeah, I do like it. And she was like, well, he wants to like try to turn it into a feature now. And she was like, oh, they're doing a reading. That's what it was. They're doing, yeah. So that's why. So it was like this theater, exactly like what you said. It's like this theater film, like crossover. And so she was like, maybe you want to do this reading that they're going to do for Sundance. And I was like, yeah, I totally do. And Sean and I like really got along. And I think like part of it, maybe it was like that, like character actor part of me, that I was interested in playing like a cult person, and not as like the ingenue, as this kind of like mother figure to her, upsetting mother figure. And then what was also nice is that, again, with the Annie Kaufman connection, is that at the same time, it's like those things are so zeitgeisty, right? And so the Civilians, the theater company that I worked with, is founded by Steve Cosson and Annie Kaufman, who both went to UCSD. We were thinking about wanting to do a show about cults. And so we had gone and seen a cult in upstate New York. I can't remember the name of that cult right now, which is fine because they don't need, and nobody should advertise them. And it was a horrible, upsetting, like disquieting experience to
Can
go
you
and interview
explain?
those people. Yeah.
Wait, when you say go see a cult, like I know
Yeah.
I played, a vineyard owner, so I went to Napa and got a tour and got to
That's so
stay,
cool.
right? Like
That
that's a
sounds
very,
glorious. Yeah.
that's
Mhm.
the opposite of sort of being researching a cult
We
potentially.
had
But
to sleep
so,
over at the cult. I hate it. It's still one of the worst experiences I've ever had. But the thing that was good about it was that I
but they were
really,
open to it. Like they knew you were coming to observe. They knew that this was for work.
yes, they knew that, yes. But it was like both. They knew that we were coming to observe. But the way they treated us, it felt like they also, I mean, because I think they were interested in like, let us show you our wonderful cult and you get the word out. I think was the idea that we would get the word out, not that we were there to criticize it in any way. And I
Right,
don't think that we knew when we went either if we were there to criticize it or not.
right.
And but the way that they treated us in some ways, you could tell that maybe they were also thinking that they can persuade maybe, a couple of us to stay. And I remember like the thing, I mean, there were a lot of, I saw a lot of things that were very upsetting that I didn't like. But the thing that they did directly that I was like, oh, this is how it happens. Well, it was such a tiny, tiny little thing, which is how all that stuff when people talk about like grooming and stuff, right? It's so tiny. And so what they said was, they're like, okay, now we're gonna pray, and everybody raise your arms up in the air. And we were there observing, and I was not interested in raising my arms up in the air. And they said, if you're brave, you'll raise your arms in the air. And I felt that thing of like, I'm brave, I'll raise my arms. I started to do it, and then I was like, that's how it starts. And I was
Mm.
like, nope, I'm not, and so it's like you have to like be like, yes, I'm like you have to be like, yes, I'm not brave. I won't raise my arm. Does that make sense? Like that's how
Yes.
I was like, that's how it starts. Is that they
Yeah.
say like if you and so I had never, fortunately in my life, I had not had that experience before. And that I really saw that. And yeah, and so there's so many experiences that I had in that cult. So that when I went to talk to, so we did the reading, and then after that, then Sean was like, I'm gonna make this movie. And we went, he was like, you want to meet and have tea and see if this is something that interests you. And we met, and I was like, I want to do this so badly. I was like, I had all these interactions. I saw all of this stuff that I'm like dying to enact, like in some ways, like exorcise it, because I'm like, I want to like get it out. Um, and he was like, great,
And
and so
that film was like really well received. And
it was,
so,
yeah,
and you got to like be in a whole movie and learn what it is to like
100%.
shoot things out of order and all of the things that come with that.
Exactly. And also the thing that was so nice about it was that it was also doing a film with people who had just graduated. It was their
Mhm.
first film. And so that melded with the experience of doing theater, is that you're all doing it together. It was not what it's like, which I just, encountered later, of doing like a big studio movie where you don't necessarily get to see the internal workings of like people figuring things out. Like all of that stuff is kept more behind, curtains and that kind of stuff.
Right.
So it was much more like doing theater. You got to see
Mhm.
people solving problems and fixing them and running, and so things felt less, it was actually became like less intimidating. Because I think that because I know the first TV job that I had, I was so intimidated. Like, I saw a still of it like a couple years ago, and I was like, I remember it's in that Law and Order, and I have a cereal box, and I couldn't put it down. I'm just like clutching a cereal box.
You'd like to see Maria's fingernails.
Totally. And it was one of those things that I had where I was like, when they say action, I was like, I might not speak. I was like, I really hope I do, because of that set. Because for me, it was just it was so unlike theater. Like it was just so polished and organized, and the machinery of it is so disguised that I was very intimidated
But
by
also
it.
when you start in a smaller film with people excited to be there, it's like there's no dumb questions. Like people are often
Yeah,
working,
exactly.
and no one's ever shown them what a market, like there's just things that
That's so funny. You're exactly right. It was
you,
very that same thing for me.
yeah,
So
like,
intimidated by the idea of hitting a mark. Like
yes.
so
And can I
intimidated.
look at the
Yeah.
person and not look like, will I be able to hit my mark with that? And then you're like
Yeah.
finding out like if you're good at ADR or bad at ADR, which is
Mm-hmm.
just looping, or like all the things you're like, hey, I'm a good looper. I'm a
Mm-hmm.
terrible mark find. Like you just find
Yes.
out, but it just takes practice like everything else, and someone not making you feel like a moron for asking.
Yeah.
And you grow up in life hearing there are no dumb questions, and then you get to a set and you feel like, oh, there are only dumb questions
That's
when
so funny.
time is
Yeah,
money.
you're exactly right. You're
Like,
exactly right.
oh,
All the
huh,
questions are
all
dumb.
of mine are very dumb. Well, think about like I was just at a, a, CSC, a wonderful classic stage theater in New York City, just had a benefit, and I was sitting with Judith Light, who was telling me about before this
Yeah.
wonderful thing that you just did with Billy Crystal that she's very excited about. Um, if you think about like Maria in um, Martha,
Marcy May
Marcy,
Marley.
May, Marley. I love
Yes,
the
I know.
alliteration. And
I like that they did
before
not compromise on the title because
they did
surely at
not.
some point someone suggested an
This was
alternate
before
title.
branding. Like now
Yeah.
branding, no one's worrying about it back then.
Right. Yeah.
Um, and then you have before a one word.
Right. Exactly.
If you can kind of, look at yourself sort of how you are on a set now. I mean, everyone's famous in before. In the movie we're describing, you were all just starting and coming
Yeah.
out. You
Yeah.
have you have your 10,000 hours, your Malcolm Gladwell hours now of being on
Yeah.
set,
I think about that too, the 10,000
right?
hours.
Like big and
I felt like
small.
I knew when I hit it.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, was that I was
But if
on
you're like, no, Alana, I literally have a clock.
yeah, right, exactly.
I can
I have
time
an odometer.
exactly
They're just like ding. No, I
10,000.
did because I had it right because we all like encountered that idea, and then yeah, I was on I think it was on this show that I did for ABC Emergence, and I was like I just felt like I passed through like a portal that I was like I'm not afraid anymore, and then I feel like it was like I messed up a line, and instead of like apologizing or like shrinking back into myself, I just doubled back, said it again, and then kept going. And I was like, oh, I think that just like it just clicked over from 999 to like I was like,
Yeah,
oh, we just hit the 10,000th hour where
right.
I'm
Where
like,
you
okay.
don't feel like you have to apologize for being there,
Yeah.
or
So that's one of the things I think is so hard about
yeah,
acting is that it's hard to accumulate those 10,000 hours
yeah,
because acting, I mean, I do think it's true that you can practice acting by yourself totally. Like you really can, and you can, make big strides and understand things and stuff like that. But the other part of having your process be spectated by other people, that's the part of it that's challenging, and that's the thing that you need 10,000 hours in is
yeah,
because not in every field is your process spectated the way
right,
an actor's process is, and being
right.
able finding it's such an important thing to be able to find out how to be free and make mistakes and go in the wrong direction and have it be completely public.
Yeah.
And
Do,
that's the thing
do
that's hard
you,
to accumulate, those hours because you need to get a job,
yeah, right. That
so
you can't do unless you
yeah,
like hire people in your apartment building to watch you work on a
exactly,
monologue in
totally.
your bedroom.
Well, that's
What?
so funny. That's the thing that the David Mamet's. I love David Mamet's books about acting. I think he's so smart about it, and that's what he says about going to school is you are buying an audience.
Yeah,
And I think it's
yeah.
a great way to think about it because you think about it in both ways. On one hand, that's a smart investment. Yeah, like buy an audience, like spend the money to have people. On the other hand, you paid for them. So they might be a little nicer to you than an actual audience.
It would be nice, right? Like
Right, exactly. Right. Sometimes
it's
it's,
not an S&M club, right? Like
yeah.
that's not what we're paying for.
Yeah.
What about nerves? What is your relationship? a lot of people are like, yeah, I know, I think nerves are great because it means you care. And I'm like, okay, I appreciate that sentiment, but I care about a lot of things that I don't feel like I have lost control of my body before addressing them. What has your relationship been to, some people call it stage fright, there's lots of words for it, but how have you as you've grown up and done your
Yeah,
hours as a human being,
yeah.
how have you become more able to handle what happens to your body when the excitement of performance enters the story?
Yeah. I have to say, I feel the way you do. I feel the same. I feel the way you do. I think people, the two questions too, people say about like, oh, that anxiety like helps them or the nerves. Say the same thing when people are like, we talk about motherhood and they're like, oh, it cleared everything up for me. I became such a better actor when I became a mother. I was like, huh? I'm like, ah.
No,
I'm like,
it
I have
just
no
added
time.
more
I'm the last
guilt.
person to get off book. Like, I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm like,
Yeah.
it got so
I
hard.
love that for them though. I
I know.
love
I love
that for
that.
them.
I love that for them too. Yeah, I really struggled with it, and I did. I think that that's like the thing that I pursued the most, maybe, and spent the most time trying to get better and better at as an actor. Is that I really noticed that the way that I thought and approached work in the privacy of my apartment was very different than I thought about and approached work in front of other people, and that I wanted those experiences to be closer together. And I did everything. I read books. I studied Alexander. I did yoga. I did meditation. I did biofeedback. I went to a lady who charged an extraordinary amount of money on Fifth Avenue to teach me how to breathe.
Huh.
Uh, I could have saved my money. I just like that it was not the breathing technique was not the thing. Um, I then had like a experience where I had a job that I was really excited by working with Emma Thompson, where everyone was very kind on set, and I was still scared.
Hmm.
And the dream, like there was something about how that finally like cast my experience in relief in a way that was able made me able to see it better, that I was like, this is exactly where I want to be, like working with Emma Thompson, exactly in the environment that I want to be, and one that is like kind and generous, and I am still afraid. And so I was like, it really is me, because I think
Hmm.
sometimes when you're in circumstances it's hard for you to figure out, you're like, well, like these circumstances are making me feel this way and stuff. And that was something where I was like, it is me. And so I'm just saying this because, and so then I went and I got an SSRI. And I am just saying that because sometimes I feel like people say you can like think your way out of it or you can do that. And I just say that there are some levels or kinds of anxiety that you cannot think your way out of. And I will
Right.
say that like now I still do those things. Like I think that biofeedback is great. I love it. I think I'm better at it when I also have an SSRI and I can meditate like better. And you know what I mean? Like I still employ all of those other techniques, but I find that it is helpful to do, and that was a really big deal. It was, it's a really,
Can
really.
I ask a question? Because there may be many people listening that when you say biofeedback, they may
Mm.
not be sure in this context what you mean. Do you mind explaining that?
Sure. So it's I went to a therapist who she puts I forget what they're called, like the contact points on your head. She puts like the gel on your head, and so it's like kind of like an EKG, thing. I
Uh-huh.
guess, right, electromagnetic. So
Yeah.
she is seeing your getting. I not seeing your, but she's getting feedback from your brain waves, and then you sit in front of the way I don't know if people do it differently, but you're sitting in front of a video screen, and you're watching a video of like ducks in water, and when your brain is anxious and scattered and not relaxed, then the video is scattered. It stops. and you have to calm yourself in order for the video to continue. So I guess that's what the feedback is that you are hooked
Right.
up to that image that you're seeing. And so you have to calm yourself in order for the image to be continuous. And it was great. I mean, what's really one of the things that's nice about it is that it's just nice to see like the feedback part of it, to see that the thing that you are experiencing is real.
Yeah.
Right? Because sometimes you feel like it's imaginary, but it's like, oh no, this external thing is responding to what's happening in my brain. And I actually just found that alone to be really helpful, and to be like, okay, so it's real. It's like a real thing,
Right. Right.
you know, and that you can then improve it.
So I want to also, I think Emma Thompson is a really glorious actress and someone I've admired. When I think
Right.
about like bucket list people, that would definitely be like,
Oh,
oh,
100%.
and can you talk, if it's okay, because sometimes people are not who you want them to be on set, and sometimes they're better than you could ever dream of
Yeah,
them
I
being.
think better, I would say. She's a really great person.
Is there anything you can share about observing her, working with her, or observing how she works that might be interesting for listeners who love her as much as I do?
Yeah, well, she was a very generous person, like right from the beginning, you
Wait,
know.
what project was this? Remind
Oh,
me
it's
again.
called Late Night. My
Yes, of
the
course.
yeah, late. So the my character, like the whole part that I was in is not in the movie. Like the, you know, his other, her husband John, played by John Lithgow, I was his like adult daughter who is upset
Got
about
it.
the relationship and all this kind of that. So that's not so that wasn't in there.
Right, but you got to
But
do it.
I got to do the good part. I got the good part,
Exactly.
which is the acting and the right, and getting to see Emma Thompson act. I mean, she was generous just from the way that she, you know, she's really easy to talk to. You walk in the makeup chair and you don't feel like there's like a big bubble around her, you know. And she introduced herself, and then when we were sitting on set, I remember she shared her cookies with me and asked me if I wanted some cashews, you know, and just like that. Like I have to say, like you know, I just have the older I get, I just have such a different perspective around things. And I'm like, yeah, like offering someone food and like sharing food with someone is like a really just like,
That's so nice.
yeah, it
So
is. You know what I mean?
nice.
No, it
Yeah.
is. I'm like, and it's like a real thing. It like, you know, calms your vagus nerve. You know what I mean?
Oh,
Like, I'm like, those
yes.
are real things. Um, and then, you know, she was very comforting to me, like during, you know, because that's the project that I was having such a hard time on, that I realized that, you know, and she was very comforting to me on set, you know, and she could tell I was nervous. And she said to me, she was like, the camera's really far away.
The camera's far away.
Far away. You know, she was like, this is the wide. Like, she was like, the camera's far away. You know, it's
Right.
okay. And I think, you know, she was saying it in two ways. Like, let yourself go. Like, this is not, you know, this is not the important thing. And also, you know, I don't know if it was that far away. Do you know what I mean? But she was just like, don't, like, let it go. You can let it go. Which was so kind of her. And then it was just fun to watch her work because she's really, really playful and she doesn't police herself. I think that was the main thing that I took away from watching her work, was that she didn't police herself, was that
Huh.
she did takes that were, you know, big and broad, and she did takes that were smaller and subtle, and she was playing around and doing stuff, and it was beautiful to see. And there was no sense of, you know, when watching her, you're not like, oh, that take is better than that one. You're just like, oh God, it's just, she's going all over the place and it's so fun. And, you know, and that's what is what I took away from it, is I was like,
Yeah.
she's not trying to hit a bullseye, or at least from outside, you know, maybe she is, and that's, and she knows that's how you hit it, is you go all over the place. And then, you know what I mean? Like, but from the outside, I was like, she's not like slowly trying to like narrow herself into something that's perfect,
Right.
you know?
So I think about, how not only are you like an actress in so many incredible projects, but at some point you decided or were interested in teaching. And
Mhm.
directing. I mean, you directed a film, and I just got to, I mean, Jess, time is so strange. A few months ago, I got to see Pre-Existing Condition, which
Mhm.
was really like a hit in New York City. And it was very cool with a rotating cast. I mean, there was a whole concept around how to do this play that had all these great parts, and you kept
Mhm.
rotating all of these well-known people into it.
Yeah.
Um, can you talk a little bit about this idea of directing and teaching and how you manage to do that when you also have projects that come up when you don't know when you're going to get some big movie or whatever. So how are you integrating all of these things you love to do at the same time?
Yeah. Well, sometimes, you just get lucky. Sometimes and something else doesn't come up. And then I think like what like yeah, and there are other times where I like chose to do the thing. I think because sometimes I felt like I looked at sometimes it would come like looking at my acting and like not loving it,
Hmm.
like not thinking that I was like, that's not really like the artist that I want to be in some way. And
Do you
so,
mean literally like watching, when you say looking at it, like I
mhm,
watched a thing I did and you
mhm.
were not pleased?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I watched and you can see yeah, I was just like, I'm not loving it. Not that anyone watches themselves and is like, perfection, but I
I
just
love
did,
it.
yeah, exactly. Print. But I think what I was seeing that I didn't like was withholding. I could see like a fear of being free and stuff like that. And I could
Hmm.
see like, I was like, oh, it's, you know, because there's something I think embarrassing about watching yourself be free. That's different to me in a way, but I was seeing stuff that like I didn't like. And so I think that I did say to myself that I was like, well, I know you can't keep just going in the same direction and thinking that something's going to change. And so I was like, so like, let's do something else. And then maybe it will affect the thing. And like, let's like, what if we go at it from like a different angle, in some way, and maybe we'll get some new information. And so, like, in that way, when I wasn't lucky and something, or like an audition would come up or something like that, I would be able to be like, that's not what I'm doing now because I like, can't ride that train forever. It's not going to go very far. I think that's how I felt. I was like, if I continue in this direction, like on this thing, I was like, it's not going to go very, it's going to end soon.
So
I was like,
directing and
yeah.
teaching, like it fed the other thing, like
Yeah.
by moving the camera around to this
Yeah.
other way of being creative. So how, I mean, I don't
The
have you
act, the
for
acting
that
thing.
much longer. So
Yeah. Like
for
the,
today,
yeah.
how
Yeah.
does the directing and the teaching influence your acting? Can you talk about that?
Yeah. Is that I just got to see. I got to see what the thing is. I had never had the experience. I was always inside it. I couldn't see what it was like. And so I didn't know what a director really needed, or I couldn't get inside their head. And so I was always assuming like the worst. And I think the same thing about being, in classes and thinking about what is the teacher thinking and getting to be on the other side of it. I saw how I loved actors. I didn't think that I was like, it's so amazing. I was like, they go away, they work on stuff, they come in, they give me things to look at that I can then helps me orient and understand the scene better. I'm like, God, they're so generous and they're so brave. And, as the director, you're sitting there, you're receiving, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's so like, it's such a luxurious position to be in to receive. I'm going to receive a bunch of things and then and I was like, oh, that's how they feel. They want you to come in with stuff. They're not looking at you and being like, what the hell is that? you know, and so that changed it for me. And also like the sense of like aliveness, I think was something that I was like, oh, that's the thing that you want from someone,
Hmm.
is that you don't want them to like understand the role completely or have like cracked this thing. You just want them to be alive. And then the two of you can collaborate together on how do you crack this character? And I think about it a lot of times too, is that like, I was able to see more that it's like everybody else, you're saying someone else's words, someone else is telling you where to stand, people are lighting you in order to create a mood. The only thing that you could actually contribute that no one else can contribute is to stand in that space and feel what it's like to stand there. Everybody else can help you with the lines, movie. Does that make, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that I didn't understand what my job was as an actor. Like I used to think that like rehearsal went well if I came up with a piece of blocking. I was like, it was a good day because I decided I should cross to the table. Where it's like, that's not the thing. Like the thing is like someone else will tell you cross the table. Like you're just stand there and live and have the experience, and someone else is going to watch you and see what you're experiencing and try to help you move through that in a way that is legible to the audience. Like I see what's happening inside you. How can I help you communicate that better to the audience if I have you try to eat this apple at the time, and then we get to see you struggle, and now we understand a little bit more about what's happening inside.
So do you feel like you're having more fun now?
Yeah,
because you've lifted a lot of restrictions on your humanity in
I
the
do.
work.
Yeah. I do feel like I'm having more fun, definitely.
That's so cool. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Maria, I adore you. I just think you're
I adore
so,
you.
you're just so generous and gifted and beautiful, and just congrats on just staying with it and
Yeah.
and reaping the benefits of like just staying the course and just being an authentic person. It's very thrilling when you're a fan of someone and I've just been a fan of yours in total for so long, and just to see all of these strangers who I don't know go like, her, we pick her, we want her in our thing, she will make it better. And watching you play, like, we're talking about grandmothers, but you have been able to play not just daughters, but also mothers now, and all of these cool things, and just
Yeah.
seeing all of the ways in which you're just bringing your beautiful self to these parts. Just know I'm excited every time I get to see you in something. But before I let you go, is there a little known fact that you can share?
Yes, I think that with some of my friends, I'll be like, that is not little known. You talk about it whenever you get a chance. But that I still think of myself as a beekeeper. I do not have a hive right now, but I have kept bees, and it is my favorite thing in the whole world. And it's just like an obsession. And I think it's like one of the things that like I'm like the proudest of, and was also like one of the things that I was doing like on my way to like deal with anxiety and stuff like that. Like I still remember driving home with like my first nuke in the back of the car and hearing all of the bees, and I was like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever done. But yeah, so I have
Bees and SSRIs. That
yep,
is the
exactly.
key to the kingdom of wellness. Maria Dizzia, thank you for being on the podcast. I cannot wait to see you again soon.
Thank you. I can't wait to see you again soon.